Let's now look at some design strategies for simple comparative experiments. So the goal of one of these simple comparative experiments is to determine the effect of the experimental conditions or the treatments on the response variable of interest. I want to know what causes what effect. So in order to do this, we have to consider other potential sources of variability in the response and then design the experiment so that we can either eliminate those other sources or ensure that they produce chance-like as opposed to systematic variability. In statistics, we can handle chance-like variability, but systematic variability, we don't have the methods to handle that. So in these experiments, we can design them to eliminate some of these sources of variability by using what's called direct control. And direct control just means that we are holding a potential source of variability constant at some fixed level. We're trying to make everything else about the experiment exactly the same so that any changes in the response we can feel confident are coming from the treatment and not from anything else. So how do we ensure that we're producing this chance-like variability? We can do that by using what's called random assignment. All that does is that we're ensuring that the experiment will not favor one experimental condition over another. And we are essentially trying to create these equivalent experimental groups because we're just randomly assigning people or individuals into the different treatment groups. When you do random assignment, you're trying to make these groups as similar as possible. It is absolutely essential that you use random assignment when you're using good experimental design. I want to show you a quick example of how random assignment can actually create similar groups. You might be thinking, how is it that I can take just random assignment and ensure that I'm getting these groups that are similar when I create the groups? So here we have an example of 50 first-year college students who participated in an experiment to investigate whether completing an online review of course material prior to an exam improves exam performance. So we would figure that these 50 subjects should vary a bit in achievement, but we could use some standard like math and verbal SAT scores to get an idea of how good of a test taker that somebody might be. So here we have a dot plot showing the math scores and the verbal scores for these 50 first-year students who are in the experiment. So when these random students are assigned to the two different experimental groups, then we would want to make sure that the assignment of these students does not tend to place higher achieving students in one group and lower achieving students in another group. We want to make sure that our two groups have a random grouping of student achievement. And you'll see here that based on several different random assignments, we have these groups represented. The green dots would be one group, the red dots would be another group. And you can see that the spread of the SAT scores stays relatively similar no matter which random assignment that we used. We don't see high scores with just one color and low scores with the other color. We see that the achievement is pretty similar for all of our groups. So we see that the random assignment is going to create these groups that are similar in terms of SAT achievement scores. But we also potentially are evening out the groups with respect to other confounding variables. So as long as the number of subjects is not too small, we're going to be able to rely on random assignment to produce comparable experimental groups. So this is why it's so important that we use random assignment when we are assigning our groups. Now, you probably have noticed that the random assignment in the experiment is different from random selection of experimental units. Even though they both use the word random assignment is us randomly assigning these people in our sample into the different groups, where random selection is what we talked about when we were talking about a simple random sample or a stratified sample. So, random selection is a possible way of choosing who's in the experiment, but it's the random assignment where we're putting the individuals into the treatment groups. So, our big takeaway here is that random assignment, either of subjects to treatments or treatments to trials, is going to be a critical component of a good experiment.